Good evening, Mountaineer Nation, and welcome into the Mountaineer Effect right here on Geek Gorilla TV. I'm your host, Marcus Dean, and don't forget to like and subscribe here on Geek Gorilla TV. We'd certainly love to have you subscribe to the page, and certainly love comments and feedback. And if you have any questions or concerns or anything you'd like to talk about on the future broadcast, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and leave a comment below. We'll certainly reply to that. And tonight's a special episode here on the Mountaineer Effect. In the words of Paul Feinbaum, the college landscape is about to change once again. Cody, my man, I tell you what, Oklahoma, Texas, the SEC, what's your views on it?
I'm personally for it. I'm not sure how real the rumors are. I know they're definitely talking. So I know that much. They had a meeting today, I think. But part of me thinks that it's Oklahoma. I don't know about Texas. I don't care to speak on Texas fans' behalf. But so there's one thing that Mountaineer and OU fans and everyone has in common. We all hate Texas. Horns down. Flag that. But yeah, so I think part of it is that OU legitimately got pissed off about Fox giving us an 11 a.m. kickoff for the Nebraska game. But I don't know. Me personally, I'm for it. I'm a firm believer that if you're not trying to beat the best, why even bother? I don't know, man. What do you think?
And all in all, it would be a smart move on Oklahoma's behalf to go to the SEC. To me, I think it would be a step up in competition for them. And I mean, it would always work to their benefit because, like you said, if you're not playing the best, then how are you going to be able to judge your team from the start? You look at the playoffs, expanding to possibly to 12 in the very near future. I mean, I think this has a lot to play into it, why Oklahoma and Texas is looking to make that jump to the SEC. I mean, could this be the start of the unquote unquote superpower conferences? As we've always heard the rumors having, the 4-8 team or the 32 power conference and stuff like that. I don't think it'll go like that, but having, 8 members on both sections of the East and West of the SEC. And I think this is time where the Big 12, since it doesn't have a major network, I think it's time for the Big 12 to, dissolve, because it seems like they've never made that initial push.
Yeah. I think a lot of it too is that people assume that, like if we couldn't beat Bama in the conference championship, we wouldn't make the playoffs. But I don't know how good your memory is, but I do recall a couple of years ago, Alabama not even making the conference championship and still Final Four. So I think between that and, with the inevitable playoff expansion, like it's going to happen. I don't know when, could be next year, could be in 5-10 years, who knows? But I don't see it not happening, So I just think personally, I think it's good for football. I really do. I think it's, as an Oklahoma fan, I'm tired of conference championships. I'm tired of worrying about who the next person up is in the conference, because it always alternates. A couple of years ago, it was WVU, and most of the time it's always like Iowa. It's always like Iowa State, Texas, like Oklahoma State's always in it.
What I've read so far, in terms of what would happen to the rest of the teams, several reports have came out that the Pac-12 would pick up Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Texas Tech and Iowa State would make the jump to the Pac-12. So the Pac-12 would in turn get 4 fresh teams, and then they would have their 16 teams that have, their conference, their North and South Conference, that would have 8 in each. So inevitable, it looks like they'd be building a power conference on the West Coast, and, what would be left in the Big 12, you would have, Kansas, WVU, TCU, and a few, and Baylor. Yeah. So what would happen to those other teams? I personally think West Virginia would either jump ship, if they're smart, to the ACC, which would make the most logical, network for them, because they're in the ACC footprint. A lot of people, have agreed with that move. And why didn't they make the move earlier, after the Big East died? there was a lot of rumors, but you never know why they jumped to the Big 12. I never understood that move, but they had to get into a conference, and I think the Big 12 was at that time was the only conference had the open ticket at that particular time.
I think a lot of the reason that WVU came to the Big 12 was because of their play style, and obviously Holgerson was a big reason why. I think they just looked at his position there and kind of saw his play style. Because I mean, I almost wonder if the ACC didn't, like, maybe they did want to go to the ACC because they beat the hell out of Clemson that bowl. I wonder if maybe that's why. I don't know. Like, I personally, geographically, WVU coming to the Big 12 never made sense. Competition wise, it's clear that they lost so much power. Like, that's my thing, is if there were two different teams that WVU had that should have been in the Big 12 championship, no less.
Yeah.
Like the Geno era for sure should have been in the Big 12. And same thing, I think with the Greer era as well, that they should have been in it too, because that game that they had with us was down to the wire for a little bit. But
yeah, especially with, during those two time frames, I think that I agree with those are the only two times that they really had a shot of getting to the Big 12 championship game and, beating Oklahoma and things like that. But, Dana Holgerson was the worst recruiter in modern football era, in my personal opinion. And he never recruited for WVU. He never recruited worth a darn. So that's why we had that drop off and we couldn't compete until Neil Brown came along. And now recruiting's picked up. And I think this year will be WVU's next step, in my opinion, to be able to take that next step to the Big 12, to move up to the Big 12 elite. Will they beat Oklahoma this year? No, I don't see that happen. But do we have a chance against Texas? Yeah. Oklahoma State? Yeah. Iowa State? Maybe, maybe not. Depends. But like I said, that's that next step for WVU to take.
I think from an Oklahoma fan perspective, the reason why I'm for the SEC move is that it would help with recruiting.
Yeah.
Because the way I look at it is a lot of times kids will just pick a shitty SEC team just because it has a logo on the field, and then that automatically gets them drafted. So, like, if Oklahoma goes to the SEC, why would they not do good? Because they already have a solid defense, despite what people say. And then in addition to Lincoln's an offensive guru. So why would you not want to go play in the SEC for Oklahoma? My thought process on the whole defense thing is that you can argue that a lot of great defenses wouldn't know what the hell to do against the Oklahoma offense, you know? Because, OU currently has the winning record against Alabama. Granted, the game that they have over them, because I think it's 3-2 or something like that. Like, because Alabama beat them in the playoffs 2 or 3 years ago when we had Kyler. But we beat them with Trevor Knight, and Saban was still the coach there. And that team that Alabama had was pretty solid, man. There was a lot of NFLers on that team. You had Amari Cooper. But yeah, I just think that Oklahoma, I'm just tired of the Big 12 championship every year. Like, which is funny because I remember me, you, and Sammy talking a while back about this, and Sammy being like, I wish that my team had that mind state of, like, we're tired of going to the like, he's like, as a fan, like, I wish that I had that problem, being tired of constant conference championship.
I think by going to the SEC, another topic would be not only would the revenue would increase for Oklahoma. I was looking at the analytics because, like Sammy always says, I'm the analytics guy and look at the numbers guy. If you look at it last year, according to the numbers I read earlier today, everybody split. I think everybody got, after all the network and everything like that. This was coming in a code year. All teams in the SEC got $44 million from the network. I mean, if you think about it, $44 million. I mean, that's a lot of money to me and you. But as in terms of a school, what could $44 million do for a school that could take care of all your Olympic sports? I could take care of all your teachers and your professor salary and all your coaches' salaries and things like that, because they have that TV revenue. And that's another thing. I think the reason why Oklahoma is going to jump ship is it comes down to the analytics of not having a TV contract with nobody. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's where you make your money, because last year during COVID, you just could watch the games on TV because you lost ticket sales revenue, you lost merchandise revenue from going, folks going to games and things like that. And that didn't happen last year.
From my understanding, the way that I'm seeing it, and again, I'm just kind of seeing what I've seen on Twitter, everyone has a different opinion on it. So I'm not speaking on behalf of every Oklahoma fan by any means, but a lot of the ones that I know want to go to the SEC, and a lot of them are saying, we're not chanting SEC, but we want to go there, and so I think what I was seeing is that OU and Texas both opted out of a TV deal, and then basically Big 12 was like, well, you already signed it, so this is why you're getting the 11 a.m. Ultimately, that's what it is, I think that as an OU fan, I don't fucking want to go to Nebraska, Oklahoma at 11 a.m. That's that's a huge rivalry, regardless of where Nebraska is currently in football. For you to just shit all over the fans of both teams and saying, here's an 11 a.m. kickoff, you do that for shitty teams. I know, again, Nebraska by no means is great, but it still draws money. Those tickets are going for $500 up right now because it's such a big rivalry.
Right. I mean, in Nebraska, even though it wasn't, they're not the superpower that they used to be, but Nebraska, Oklahoma, that's a traditional powerhouse rivalry. It's, it kind of reminds me of the WVU Pitt rivalry. It's a brawl. These teams love to hate each other. Both fan bases hate each other. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, right now, is that 11 o'clock Central Time, or is that 11 o'clock Eastern Time?
11 o'clock my time.
So that'd be 12. So that'd be 12 o'clock my time. So
yeah,
that would be no.
Right.
I could see that.
Yeah, and the thing is too is I lived in Nebraska when I was stationed there, and all those fans, all the people do for as shitty of a program as they have, they talk so much, and they're like Oklahoma, because I always wore OU gear naturally, and there's always people chiming in talking about, Nebraska, OU sucks and all this, and I'm like, well, you guys left the conference and you haven't really done shit since, you're
exactly, and I think too, in the grand scheme of things, when is this going to happen? I mean, because I read an article earlier said something to the fact that, like you said a minute ago, that OU and Texas didn't renew their TV deal. And if I read everything right, OU didn't renew for 22. Yeah. So if my mind serves me correctly, and all these TV deals, and they're talking about the playoff expansion in 23, this would make perfect sense for everybody to do the new conference alignment in terms for the new 12-team playoff when the 2023 season rolls around.
Yeah, man. I think that honestly, it's going to come down to, you're going to have little man syndrome from the smaller colleges that are like, I don't want to play these teams, and then a lot of it too is if Oklahoma leaves, then a lot of those teams that make money, a lot of those lesser teams like Kansas and stuff like that, most of their football money comes when they play us.
Right. And that's the big game for them. In recent years, Iowa State's always been a big game for WVU. Texas is always, we always love to hate on Texas, and, vice versa. And for the Kansas States and the Kansas and the Texas Techs, I mean, it's more packed with more Mountaineer fans as opposed to, the visiting team. But when you have Oklahoma come to Morgantown, Oklahoma brings, 10, 15,000 fans with them too.
And that's the thing too is, I want to next time that they play, they play in West Virginia next year, right? Because this year's a home game for us.
Right off the top of my head, I believe so. I think 22. I think Oklahoma comes to Morgantown.
Okay, yeah, I want to try to go to that, man, because I have a lot of friends and family, and even though I'm an Oklahoma fan, I was born in West Virginia and I lived there for 4 years, and that's how Sammy and I have ties. And ultimately, when I moved here, WVU wasn't in the Big 12, so there wasn't really a rivalry, but the thing is I couldn't watch their games. So that's what made me become an OU fan, is it was hey, it's either OSU or OU. And I was like, no, I'll be an Oklahoma fan, and so I always kind of want to see, I don't ever want to see WVU beat OU, but I want to see them be good, and contend still. But
mean, and I think about, in terms of the game matches, if this does happen, I mean, for everybody involved, I mean, it's a win-win for Oklahoma and Texas. I mean, in terms, Texas has their own network. I was thinking about that earlier. Texas has the Longhorn Network,
Right.
and if the Longhorn Network would combine with the SEC network, I mean, that's just going to be able to triple the revenue for Texas. So I think that's why they're kind of, launching onto the hip pocket of Oklahoma. Be like, I'm sure their chancellors have been like, hey, let's go to the SEC. We can do it together. It will come as a package deal, and the SEC is going to like, package deal, Texas, Oklahoma, open up those two markets. In terms of college football, money's everything.
The one thing that I've noticed too on social media is like, I've never seen OU fans and Texas fans link up together and be all for it. Like it's almost like we call it a ceasefire on both fan bases. Like, all right, both want to go, so let's stick this out, see what we can do.
This would be a monumental landscape shift. I mean, you're looking at basically killing the conference.
Yeah. See, that's my thing too, is I feel like who would you take from if all these because I for a while, at least for the last 3 or 4 years, have felt like we need a big conference shakeup across the board because it's the same shit every year, and then you'll see a lot of these teams, like Cincinnati was one last year where you see a team from a totally random ass, like you would never expect, you pop up like, like I kind of want to see that, So imagine if we'd have had a 12-team expansion last year and then Cincinnati could have been in it and you just seen a really wild top 12, or like a good playoff. And then, that, and honestly, if I'm a West Virginia fan, like I feel like I would be happier with that too, because it gives you a chance to really win.
It does. It gives you that opportunity to go in, and play a Cinderella. I mean, every once in a while, West Virginia is going to have they're going to be stacked. Every 2 to 3 years, West Virginia is always stacked with talent. Especially now with Neil Brown, and I think this is going to be a more consistent basis for us in the near future. That's just my opinion. But in years past, WVU would have a good team every 3 or 4 years, and with the playoff expanding, and I think that would be good for WVU, and be good for a team like Cincinnati. It would be good for a team, like a couple of years ago in 2017 when UCF had that role where they beat, I think, Auburn in the Peach Bowl. They made them look stupid.
I just don't see as a football fan how you could complain about a big conference shakeup, because it gives a chance, especially with the potential expansion, it gives a chance to teams like UCF, and all these teams that are like, I didn't lose to anybody. Why? So I should be in the talk, like, all right, let's put number 12 UCF against number 1 Alabama and see what, like worst comes to worst, like maybe UCF's right. Maybe they could have beat Bama, but that's the thing is when you expand it and then you have a conference shakeup, you see new teams come out the woodworks. I believe that if they go, that they would take something. So that's what I was going to ask you next.
Yeah.
Is if you're the Big 12, who do you take?
Honestly, to replace those two, I mean, you could possibly look at, geographically. If I'm thinking geographically in my head, you could possibly try to cannibalize the Conference USA and the American Athletic Conference by bringing Cincinnati and Memphis, because geographically that would make sense for both teams. But you got to think though, would either one of those teams be looking to move to if OU, if they see, OU Texas leave, and my team's wanting to go to a bigger conference, could this be the time where Notre Dame stays, stuck on themselves and don't want to join a conference, but yet plays a ACC, 5 ACC teams every year, and they just want to be Notre Dame? Who could say that Cincinnati wouldn't jump ship to the ACC if it would be open? And if Cincinnati would jump, Who's to say West Virginia wouldn't go ahead and jump to the ACC or the Big Ten? Honestly, believe in my heart of hearts, if this comes to pass, and it is true, Oklahoma and Texas leave. I really think the Big 12 dies.
Yeah, I mean, that's from an OU perspective. I feel like we're kind of dragging this conference along. We're kind of what makes it relevant. And even then, anytime we lose, like in the playoffs, no one looks at how close the Bama game was,
or the Georgia game.
Or the Georgia game, I don't want to talk about. But that's the hardest football loss I've ever experienced. That's like, to me, that's your Pitt WVU. I just feel like, we've been carrying this sorry ass conference for a while. And I mean, think about the spice that came when WVU came to the Big 12. It really did. So change up is good for everyone.
Right. I mean, and if you think, the Pac-12, if they do, if the Pac-12 would jump in and cannibalize some teams, the Pac-12 has their own network. So the Pac-12, that would benefit, Kansas State, that would benefit Texas Tech. That would benefit and all of those teams who's Iowa State, who was looking to jump to the Big 12. I mean, you're looking at a stacked, Pac-12. You're looking at a stacked SEC. If just say those four teams jump with Texas and Oklahoma, that's going to leave the Big 12 with nothing. But I think the ball's already started rolling towards inevitability. I mean, I seen this with the Big East. There was the Big East tried for years after, to survive with, when they brought in UConn, they brought in South Florida to help, balance the Big East out. And eventually the Big East died because they couldn't compete anymore with the other conferences. Then when Maryland jumped to the ACC, then soon came Syracuse, then Boston College, then lo and behold, you look up, you don't got anybody left in your conference because they had that open door.
Yeah, I don't. You see Oklahoma's statement on the situation? They were on a high horse, essentially saying we value loyalty, so we're not, basically saying we're against this and we don't want to leave. And who cares? Who cares what you think?
I mean, to me, I mean, would it be feasible for if Oklahoma State's getting quartered by the Pac-12? I mean, geographically, that really doesn't make sense for OSU or Kansas State or anything like that because, in a way, yes, in a way, no. But you got to think, though, you're going to go there and you're going to have that more availability for more money for that to happen as well.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what it comes down to, man. It's a money game. And OU and Texas and the SEC is a lot of money. That's a lot of dollar signs, and ultimately, if I'm an SEC fan, I'd be all for it because then they like to say, oh, we are Oklahoma chokes and we beat the shit out of Oklahoma. We own Oklahoma. Well, all right, buddy, let's see how it is when we come to your conference. And then you have to play us. And then suddenly you have all these bottom feeder fan bases that are like Ole Miss and Tennessee and stuff that are sitting there running their mouth about how we choke and all that. And it's like, well, you can't beat us. So if we're that bad, what does that say about you?
All right, folks. Well, that will do it for tonight's broadcast. So thank you to Cody for joining me here on this very special edition of the Mountaineer Effect. Like I said before, make sure you like and subscribe here on Geek Gorilla TV here on YouTube. And also make sure you subscribe. We'd definitely love to hear from you. This is Marcus Dean for the Mountaineer Effect. Let's go, Mountaineers.